My name is Minnie, and I'm 54 years old. For 2 years now, I've been living with my daughter Sarah and her husband David ever since my beloved Robert passed away from a sudden heart attack. I thought moving in with family would be my safe harbor, a place where I could heal and help raise my granddaughter Emma. I believed that blood was thicker than water, that family meant unconditional love and support. But sometimes the people closest to us can make us feel the most invisible, the most taken for granted. Sometimes the very people who should protect us are the ones who strip away our dignity piece by piece until we barely recognize ourselves. I thought I knew my place in this family, but I was about to learn a painful lesson about boundaries, respect, and what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness. Before I share this story with you, I'd love to know where you're watching from. And if you've ever felt like your own family treated you more like hired help than a loved one, please hit that like button so I know I'm not alone in this. Don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories that matter. Now let me tell you about the night I had to choose between my dignity and my family, and how that choice changed everything forever. Let me take you back to the beginning when life still made sense. For 28 beautiful years, Robert and I built a life together that was simple but filled with love. He was a carpenter with gentle hands and an even gentler heart, and I worked part-time at the local library while raising Sarah. Our little house on Maple Street wasn't fancy, but it was ours. Every morning, Robert would kiss me goodbye before heading to work, and every evening we'd sit on the front porch sharing stories from our day. Then came that terrible Thursday in March. Robert was fixing the kitchen faucet when he suddenly clutched his chest and collapsed. The paramedics said it was massive, that he likely didn't suffer. But I suffered enough for both of us. At 52, I found myself alone in a house that echoed with memories, but felt hollow without his laughter filling the rooms. Sarah was wonderful during those first dark months. She'd drive the 40 minutes from her suburban home twice a week, bringing Emma and homemade casseroles. She'd hold me while I cried and help me sort through Robert's belongings when I was ready. 6 months after the funeral, as I sat surrounded by condolence cards and unpaid bills, Sarah made an offer that seemed like an answer to prayer. "Mom, this is ridiculous. You rattling around in that big house all by yourself, and here we are with this huge place, and Emma asking for Grandma every day. Come live with us. We're family. We take care of each other." The idea felt like a lifeline. David seemed genuinely pleased when Sarah presented the plan, and 5-year-old Emma bounced with excitement at the thought of daily bedtime stories from Grandma. Within a month, I'd sold the Maple Street house, put most of the furniture in storage, and moved into their spacious colonial home in Westfield Hills. The first 6 months were blissful. I had my own bedroom and small sitting area upstairs, and I genuinely enjoyed helping around the house. Cooking had always been my love language, and I delighted in preparing Emma's favorite pancakes, maintaining the garden, and having dinner ready when Sarah and David came home from their demanding jobs. Sarah worked in marketing at a tech company, and David was an accountant at a mid-sized firm. Both worked long hours, so my presence truly helped the household run smoothly. Everything changed the weekend David's parents came for their first visit since I'd moved in. Harold and Patricia lived in an expensive retirement community in Florida, and I'd only met them briefly at Sarah and David's wedding 8 years earlier. They arrived in a gleaming white Cadillac, Patricia stepping out in designer clothes, with perfectly styled silver hair, Harold in pressed khakis, and a polo shirt that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. From the moment they walked through the front door, I sensed something shift in the household dynamics. Patricia surveyed the living room like a general inspecting troops, commenting on dust I couldn't see and suggesting improvements to furniture arrangements. During dinner, she asked me to refill her water glass, then requested I bring her a different fork because this one had water spots. Each request was delivered with a sweet smile, but there was steel underneath that made me uncomfortable. Minnie, dear, could you be a lamb and fetch my reading glasses from my purse? And while you're up, would you mind adjusting the air conditioning? It's rather warm in here. I complied because I wanted to be gracious, but something about her tone reminded me of the wealthy library patrons who used to treat staff like servants. Harold was quieter, but equally expectant, asking me to bring his coffee to the living room and iron his shirt for the next day's golf outing. That first visit lasted only 3 days, but I noticed Sarah watching me carefully during their stay. When I mentioned feeling a bit uncomfortable with all the requests, she brushed it off with nervous laughter. Mom, they're just old-fashioned. You know how people from their generation can be. They mean well and they really like you. They told me what a wonderful addition you are to the family. I wanted to believe her, but something in her eyes suggested she was trying to convince herself as much as me. Still, I pushed down my discomfort and told myself I was being overly sensitive. These were David's parents, after all, and Sarah's in-laws. If putting up with a little bossiness was the price of keeping peace in the family, I was willing to pay it. 2 months later, Patricia called with news that would test my resolve far more severely. Their retirement community condo was experiencing major plumbing issues that would take 4 to 6 weeks to repair. Could they possibly stay with Sarah and David during the renovations? My heart sank when Sarah agreed immediately, but I kept my concerns to myself. From the moment they moved in with their 3 large suitcases and countless special requirements, the household atmosphere changed dramatically. Patricia had very specific needs for her morning routine. Her coffee had to be prepared in exactly the right way. Colombian beans ground fresh each morning, brewed to precise strength, served in a warmed china cup with a small spoon and cloth napkin. Her breakfast required fresh fruit cut in specific shapes and sizes, toast with butter and marmalade arranged just so. Minnie, sweetheart, could you handle my breakfast tomorrow? I'm sure you remember how I like things from our last visit. The word handle stuck in my throat like a bitter pill, but I nodded and smiled. What choice did I have? This was temporary, I reminded myself. Harold was no better, expecting his newspaper ironed flat, his medications sorted each morning, and his afternoon tea served precisely at 3:30 with particular cookies arranged on a silver tray I had to polish daily. The most painful part was watching Sarah navigate between her mother-in-law's demands and her own mother's growing discomfort. When I tried to talk to her privately about feeling more like hired help than family, she avoided eye contact and changed the subject. Mom, they're just set in their ways. Please bear with it. It's only for a few weeks, and it means so much to David that we can help his parents during this difficult time. But it wasn't just a few isolated incidents. Patricia began assigning me tasks throughout the day, always with that saccharine tone that made refusal seem impossible. Minnie dear, would you mind terribly doing a load of our delicates? The hotel laundry simply ruins fine fabrics. Minnie, could you straighten up our room? I notice the bedspread isn't quite smooth. The breaking point of this phase came during a phone conversation I accidentally overheard. Patricia was talking to her sister while I cleaned the guest bathroom down the hall. Oh, Martha, you simply must visit when our place is fixed. We're staying with David and Sarah, and they have wonderful help here. David's mother-in-law is very useful. She keeps everything running smoothly and doesn't cost us a penny. It's quite a convenient arrangement. The word help hit me like a physical blow. I wasn't family staying temporarily. I wasn't a beloved grandmother contributing to the household. I was help. I was useful. I was convenient. That night I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Robert's voice echoing in my memory. Minnie, you're worth your weight in gold. Don't ever let anyone make you feel small. But I was feeling smaller by the day, disappearing into the role of unpaid domestic staff in what was supposed to be my own home. When I approached Sarah the next morning hoping for support, her response crushed what remained of my optimism. "Mom, honestly, what's the big deal? You're living here, rent-free, eating our food, and Emma loves having you around. The least you can do is help out when we have guests. It's not like Patricia is asking you to scrub floors. She just appreciates the way you do things." The casual dismissal of my concerns, the implication that I owed them service in exchange for shelter, made me realize that somewhere along the way I'd become a burden rather than a blessing. My own daughter was seeing me through Patricia's eyes now as useful help rather than beloved family. As their stay stretched into the third week, Patricia's requests became increasingly presumptuous. She began planning social events and expecting me to cater them. First, it was a small luncheon with 2 ladies from her church who were visiting the area. Then it escalated to a dinner party she wanted to host for David and Sarah's neighbors. "Minnie, I've told the Johnsons and the Whites about your wonderful cooking. Would you be a dear and prepare that lovely pot roast recipe for Saturday evening? I thought we could show off a bit and really impress David's colleagues." I felt trapped between my desire to maintain family harmony and my growing resentment at being voluntold for increasingly elaborate entertaining duties. Sarah's response when I expressed hesitation was the most hurtful yet. "Mom, it's just one evening. Think of it as helping family. Patricia is trying to build relationships in our community, and your cooking really is exceptional. Besides, it's not like you have other plans." The dismissive assumption that I had nothing else to do, no other value beyond my domestic skills, stung deeply. But I agreed, telling myself it was truly just one evening, and then their renovations would be complete. That Saturday became a nightmare I'll never forget. Patricia invited not 2 couples but 4, making it an intimate dinner party for 10 people total. The menu she'd promised was far more complex than pot roast. She expected appetizers, soup, salad, main course, and dessert all prepared to restaurant-quality standards. I spent the entire day shopping for specialty ingredients, preparing elaborate dishes I'd never attempted before, and setting the dining room to Patricia's exacting standards. She supervised every detail from the way I folded the napkins to the precise angle of the silverware placement. "Minnie dear, could you remake the hollandaise? It's a touch too thick, and the flowers need to be arranged lower so guests can see each other across the table." When the guests arrived, I was exhausted from 12 hours of preparation, but Patricia expected me to serve each course clear plates between servings and maintain drink refills throughout the evening. What hurt most was her introduction when guests complimented the food. "Oh, we're so fortunate to have wonderful help. Minnie here takes such good care of all the domestic details. She's very reliable and doesn't cost much." The casual way she discussed me as if I weren't standing right there, the reduction of my value to being economical help, made my cheeks burn with humiliation. When one guest asked if I was available for hire for their own dinner party, Patricia laughed and said, "Oh, she's part of the family arrangement. Quite convenient for everyone." I served silently for 4.5 hours, never offered a seat at the table, never included in the conversation, treated exactly like hired catering staff. By the time I finished cleaning up at nearly midnight, I was physically exhausted and emotionally broken. When I approached Sarah the next morning to express how demeaning the experience had been, her reaction shattered my heart completely. "Mom, you're being overdramatic. Everyone had a wonderful time, and Patricia got so many compliments on the evening. I don't understand why you can't just feel good about contributing to the family instead of making everything about yourself." The accusation of selfishness coming from my own daughter felt like a knife between my ribs. This was the child I'd raised to be kind and considerate, who I'd supported through college by working double shifts at the library. Now she was telling me that wanting basic respect and recognition was selfish. That afternoon, I overheard David and Sarah discussing me in their bedroom while I folded laundry in the hall. "Your mother needs to understand that this is a mutually beneficial arrangement," David was saying. "She gets free housing and meals. We get help with Emma and household management. If she can't handle occasional entertaining, maybe she's not as helpful as we thought." Sarah's response destroyed what little hope I had left. "I know. I'm getting tired of her constant complaints. Maybe we need to set clearer expectations about her role here." My role. Not my place as a family member, but my role as an employee who wasn't meeting expectations. The breaking point came on a Saturday morning in the 4th week of Patricia and Harold's stay. I was enjoying a rare quiet moment with my coffee and the newspaper when Patricia swept into the kitchen with an announcement that would change everything. "Minnie, wonderful news. My bridge club ladies are in town for the weekend, and I've invited them for brunch tomorrow. 12 ladies total. I thought we'd do something elegant. Eggs Benedict, fresh pastries, mimosas, beautiful fruit arrangements. You know how to make it special." The casual assumption that I would cater a brunch for 12 people announced less than 24 hours in advance finally broke something inside me. For weeks, I'd swallowed my pride, ignored my exhaustion, and accepted being treated like domestic staff. But this was different. This felt like a test of how far they could push me before I broke. "Patricia, I'm sorry, but I can't do that. 12 people is a lot of work, and I haven't agreed to cater your social events. Perhaps you should hire professional catering for tomorrow." The silence that followed my refusal was deafening. Patricia's perfectly made-up face registered shock, then indignation, then something that looked almost like panic. "Excuse me, did you just refuse to help with a simple family gathering?" "It's not a family gathering, Patricia. It's your bridge club, and I'm not a caterer. I'm happy to help with reasonable household tasks, but I won't be treated like hired help anymore." Within minutes, David was called into the kitchen, then Sarah was summoned from upstairs. The confrontation that followed revealed the ugly truth about how my presence in this household was really viewed. Patricia spoke first, her voice quivering with righteous indignation. "David, I'm afraid Minnie is being quite difficult. I simply asked for help with a small gathering and she refused. After all we've done to welcome her into this family." Sarah immediately took Patricia's side without even asking for my version of events. "Mom, what's wrong with you? Patricia just wants to entertain her friends, and you're acting like she asked you to cater a wedding." "Sarah, she wants me to prepare Eggs Benedict for 12 people with less than a day's notice. When did I become the household caterer?" David's response cut the deepest. "Minnie, I think you're forgetting that you live here because we're generous enough to provide for you. The least you can do is help when we need it." The word generous hit me like a slap. My contribution to this household, my help with Emma, my cooking and cleaning and emotional support had been completely erased. In their minds, I was a charity case who should be grateful for scraps. "I'm not forgetting anything, David. I'm remembering that I'm a human being, not a servant." Patricia gasped dramatically. "How dare you speak to my son that way? Maybe Minnie needs to learn her place in this household." That phrase, "learn her place," ignited something fierce inside me. But before I could respond, Sarah delivered the blow that would change our relationship forever. "If you can't respect our guests and help when we need you, maybe you shouldn't live here anymore. Pack your bags, Mom. I can't deal with this drama anymore." The words hung in the air like poison gas. My own daughter, the child I'd sacrificed for and loved unconditionally, was choosing her mother-in-law's convenience over her own mother's dignity. She was throwing me out of what I'd foolishly believed was my home. Patricia looked triumphant. Harold nodded approvingly. David avoided my eyes entirely, and Sarah, my beloved Sarah, stared at me with cold determination that I'd never seen before. "Fine," I said quietly. "I'll pack." Walking upstairs to gather my belongings felt like climbing toward my own execution. My hands shook as I pulled clothes from the closet and folded them into the same suitcase I'd used to move in 2 years earlier. Every item I packed represented another piece of the life I'd tried to build here, another memory now tainted by this devastating rejection. Emma found me halfway through packing and crawled onto my lap. Her 5-year-old face scrunched with confusion. "Why are you putting your clothes in the suitcase, Grandma? Are we going on a trip?" How do you explain abandonment to a child? How do you tell your granddaughter that her mother chose social convenience over family loyalty? Grandma has to go stay somewhere else for a while, sweetheart. But I don't want you to go. Who will read me stories? Who will make my special pancakes? Her innocent questions broke my heart all over again. I hugged her tightly, breathing in her little girl's scent of strawberry shampoo and playground dirt. "You'll still see Grandma, baby. Just not every day." When I carried my suitcase downstairs 40 minutes later, the house felt different. Patricia was in the living room making phone calls, probably alerting her bridge club that their catered brunch was back on track. David was nowhere to be seen. Sarah stood by the front door. Her arms crossed, her face set in stubborn lines that reminded me painfully of her father. "Mom, I hope you understand this is for the best. We all need some space to figure things out." The clinical way she spoke, as if she were firing an employee rather than exiling her mother, showed me how completely I'd lost her. The taxi I'd called was already waiting in the driveway. "I understand more than you think, Sarah." That was the last thing I said to her before walking out of the house where I'd hoped to spend my golden years. The motel room I rented that night was a far cry from the comfortable bedroom I'd just vacated. The carpet was worn thin, the furniture was scarred and outdated, and the air smelled of industrial disinfectant and other people's sadness. But for the first time in weeks, I could breathe freely. Sitting on the edge of that cheap bed, surrounded by the few possessions I'd managed to pack, I finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of what had happened. My daughter had chosen her in-laws over her mother. She'd reduced me to nothing more than convenient domestic help, and then discarded me when I refused to accept that role. But as I sat there in that lonely room, Robert's voice came back to me as clearly as if he were sitting beside me. "Minnie, you're stronger than you know. Don't ever let anyone make you feel small, not even family. You're worth more than their treatment of you." For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something other than hurt and confusion. I felt angry. Not the petty, destructive kind of anger, but the clean, purposeful fury that comes from being truly wronged. I was 54 years old, not 94. I was healthy, intelligent, and capable. Most importantly, I wasn't as helpless as Sarah believed. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in months. "Mark Thompson Law Office." "Mark, it's Minnie. I need to see you first thing Monday morning. It's time I understood exactly what Robert left me." Monday morning arrived gray and drizzly, matching my mood, as I sat across from Mark Thompson in his downtown law office. Mark had handled Robert's estate, but in my grief and confusion, I'd only absorbed the basics. I owned the house we'd sold, I had Robert's life insurance money in savings, and there were some investments I barely understood. "Minnie, I'm glad you called. To be honest, I've been concerned about your living situation. When you mentioned moving in with Sarah, I wondered if you fully understood your financial position." For the next hour, Mark walked me through documents I should have studied more carefully 2 years ago. Robert had been far more financially savvy than I'd realized. His life insurance policy was substantial. His pension had survivor benefits I'd barely touched. Most significantly, he'd made careful investments over the years that had grown considerably. "Minnie, you're not wealthy, but you're certainly comfortable. You could buy a nice condo, live independently, even travel if you wanted. You don't need to depend on anyone for housing or support." The revelation was staggering. All this time, I'd felt like a burden, a charity case grateful for my daughter's generosity. In reality, I'd been subsidizing their household while being treated like hired help. "Mark, there's something else. I need to understand what Sarah knows about Robert's estate." Mark's expression grew uncomfortable. "She was the executor initially, so she handled the immediate details. But Minnie, I don't think she realized the full scope of your assets. The investments have grown significantly since Robert's death, and the insurance settlement was larger than most people expected. What about the furniture and household items I put in storage? Everything from your previous home belongs to you, obviously. Sarah may have forgotten that some of those pieces are quite valuable. Your grandmother's china, Robert's antique tools, that dining room set you inherited from your mother." As Mark continued explaining my actual financial situation, a plan began forming in my mind. I wasn't going to run away and hide. I wasn't going to disappear quietly and let Sarah believe she'd won. I was going to reclaim my dignity and my possessions, and in the process teach my daughter a lesson about consequences she'd apparently never learned. "Mark, I need you to do several things for me. First, I want a complete inventory of everything in storage that belongs to me. Second, I need you to look into Sarah and David's financial situation. And third, I want to schedule a formal meeting to reclaim my property." Mark smiled for the first time since I'd arrived. "Minnie, I think you're about to remind some people that you're not as helpless as they assumed." By Thursday, Mark had compiled a disturbing but enlightening report. Sarah and David were in serious financial trouble. David's accounting firm had lost several major clients, and his income had dropped significantly. They were 3 months behind on their mortgage, and Sarah's credit cards were maxed out. They'd been counting on my monthly contribution to household expenses, plus my unpaid labor to stay afloat. More importantly, many of the furnishings in their house were actually mine. The dining room set, the living room furniture, the large television, even some of the artwork had come from the house Robert and I shared. In my grief and desire to help, I'd let Sarah use them indefinitely. Now it was time to reclaim what was rightfully mine. Friday morning, I hired the most expensive moving company in town and returned to Sarah's house with Mark, 2 professional movers, and a detailed inventory list. The shock on Sarah's face when she answered the doorbell was almost worth the heartache of the past week. "Mom, what are you doing here? And who are all these people?" "I'm collecting my belongings, Sarah. All of them." The next 2 hours were the most satisfying and painful of my life. Item by item, the movers loaded my property into their truck while Sarah watched in growing horror. The antique dining set that had belonged to my mother, the china cabinet filled with wedding gifts, the comfortable leather sofa where we'd all watched movies together, the 60-inch television Robert had saved for months to buy. "Mom, you can't take the furniture. We need these things. This is Emma's home." "These things belong to me, Sarah. They always have. You've just been borrowing them." Patricia appeared from the guest room, her face flushed with indignation. "This is outrageous. You can't just come in here and strip the house bare." "Actually, Mrs. Patterson, she can," Mark said calmly, showing Patricia the ownership documents. "Everything being removed belongs to Mrs. Hartwell." David arrived home from work to find his living room empty, except for a few pieces they'd bought themselves and some expensive items that belonged to his parents. The full reality of their situation began to dawn on him as he surveyed the nearly bare rooms. "Minnie, we need to talk about this reasonably. Maybe we can work out some kind of arrangement." The time for reasonable discussion was when you supported Patricia in treating me like a servant. The time for arrangements was before your wife threw me out of the house. Sarah was crying now, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of panic as she realized the full scope of their financial crisis. "Mom, please. I made a mistake. We all did. But taking the furniture won't solve anything. Emma needs stability. Emma needs to see that actions have consequences. She needs to understand that you don't treat family like hired help and then expect their continued support when it's convenient." As the movers loaded the last items, I turned to address Sarah directly, knowing these might be the last words I spoke to her for a very long time. "You chose Patricia's approval over your mother's dignity. You chose social convenience over family loyalty. Those were your decisions, Sarah, and these are the consequences. When you're ready to treat me like family instead of staff, you know how to reach me." I handed her a business card with my new address and phone number, climbed into Mark's car, and drove away from the house where I'd learned that blood isn't always thicker than water. And sometimes the people who claim to love you most are the ones who respect you least. The condo I bought 3 weeks later was nothing like the spacious colonial I'd left behind, but it was mine in every sense of the word. 1,000 square feet of freedom, 2 bedrooms filled with furniture that nobody could take away, a kitchen where I cooked what I wanted when I wanted it. The first few months were lonely. I missed Emma desperately, and despite everything that had happened, I missed the daughter Sarah used to be. But slowly, I began building a life that was mine alone for the first time in over 30 years. I joined the community center's book club and discovered a love for contemporary fiction I'd never had time to explore. I took yoga classes and made friends with women who appreciated my dry humor and didn't see me as useful help. I volunteered at the local animal shelter, finding joy in caring for creatures who asked for nothing more than kindness. Most surprisingly, I discovered I was good at being alone. For decades, I'd defined myself through my relationships as Robert's wife, as Sarah's mother, as Emma's grandmother. Now I was learning who Minnie was when she wasn't taking care of everyone else's needs first. 6 months after I'd walked out of Sarah's house, she called. Her voice was small and shaky, nothing like the confident woman who'd ordered me to pack my bags. "Mom, it's Sarah. Could we maybe talk?" "I'm listening." "Things have been really hard since you left. David's company let him go last month, and we're probably going to lose the house. Patricia and Harold went back to Florida after you took the furniture. They said the house felt too empty for proper entertaining." The irony was perfect. Patricia had driven away the woman who'd actually been making their lives comfortable, leaving them with an empty house and empty bank accounts. "I'm sorry you're struggling, Sarah." "Mom, I know I messed up. I know I hurt you terribly. I let Patricia and her opinions become more important than my own mother, and I'll regret that for the rest of my life." It was the first real apology she'd offered, but apologies don't erase months of humiliation and betrayal. "What do you want from me, Sarah?" "I want my mother back. I want Emma to know her grandmother. I want to find a way to fix what I broke." 2 weeks later, we met at a neutral location, a small cafe downtown, where neither of us had memories to complicate the conversation. Sarah looked older, worn down by stress and financial worry. For the first time in years, she looked like she needed her mother instead of resenting her presence. Mom, I need you to know that I understand now how wrong I was. David and I talked about it for hours after you left. I was so worried about impressing Patricia about being the perfect daughter-in-law that I forgot how to be a decent daughter. Sarah, impressing Patricia cost you your mother's respect. Was it worth it? She cried. Then real tears of genuine remorse rather than the frustrated tears of someone who wasn't getting their way. No, it wasn't worth anything. Patricia doesn't even call anymore now that we can't provide the comfortable lifestyle she expected. She only valued our relationship when it came with benefits. Over coffee and careful conversation, we began the slow process of rebuilding trust. I agreed to supervised visits with Emma Sunday dinners at neutral locations, gradual steps toward healing. But I also made it clear that things would never return to the way they were before. Sarah, I love you, and I love Emma, but I will never again live in a situation where I'm treated as anything less than family. I will never again accept being useful rather than valued. I understand, Mom, and I promise that will never happen again. Sarah kept her promise. When their house was foreclosed 6 months later, she didn't ask to move in with me. When David found work in another state, she didn't expect me to follow. When Emma missed her grandmother, Sarah drove the hour to my condo instead of demanding I come to them. Slowly, carefully, we rebuilt our relationship on new terms. Sarah learned to appreciate rather than exploit my help. I learned that loving someone doesn't require accepting their mistreatment. Emma learned that Grandma was a person worthy of respect, not just someone who existed to serve others. The most important lesson I learned was about my own worth. For too long, I'd believed that being needed was the same as being loved, that serving others was the only way to earn my place in their lives. Robert had tried to teach me better, but I hadn't truly understood until I was forced to choose between my dignity and my family's approval. Respect starts with self-respect. When you know your worth, others have no choice but to see it too, and sometimes the people we love most need to lose us to remember our value. I think about Patricia sometimes, and I don't feel anger anymore. She taught me an invaluable lesson about boundaries and self-worth, though I'm sure that wasn't her intention. She showed me that some people will take as much as you're willing to give, and then blame you for not giving more. But mostly I think about Robert and how proud he'd be of the woman I've become in the years since his death. I learned to stand up for myself. I learned that family is about love and respect, not convenience and service. I learned that sometimes walking away is the strongest thing you can do. Sometimes the people we love most need to lose us to remember our value. And sometimes we need to walk away to find ourselves again. Thank you for listening to my story. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where family took advantage of your kindness? How did you handle it? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Your experiences might help someone else who's struggling with similar challenges. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more real-life stories about finding strength in difficult times. Share this with anyone who might need to hear that their dignity matters more than keeping the peace. Remember, you teach people how to treat you, and it's never too late to demand the respect you deserve. Take care of yourselves, and remember that your worth isn't determined by how useful you are to others.